What you just heard or didn't hear, that was my reality for a whole year. Silence. I'm a classical musician. I spent most of my career with the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, and making music and sound was the world I lived in. The colors we could create on stage, it was everything to me. And I did that for so many years until my hearing started to change and get crackly and twisted, and it became clear that I was going deaf. And during that time, I had to ask myself, how am I going to move through this? I started learning music when I was 9 years old. In my elementary school, you had to pass a written test. I don't quite get that. And I did, and so I was allowed to study an instrument, but in my school, there were only two choices. There was piano and there was violin. And on the day the teacher came in to show these instruments, the person playing the violin was so bad that I chose piano as quickly as I could. But I was only 9. I didn't realize you actually need to own a piano to be able to study piano. So we had to work that out. We were able to borrow one. And once that instrument was in my house, I had so much fun playing with it, and not just learning the melodies my teacher wanted me to learn, but really playing with all the different sounds of what happens when I press this note louder or softer. What happens if I hold down a lot of low notes and just let them linger? And you can hear these higher notes hidden in there. They're called harmonics, but not going to be a test on this. And there was just so much fun. And my piano teacher, she was such a lovely woman. And every time I went to her office for my lesson, it smelled like coffee. So it was my favorite place. Then we moved when I was in middle school, and we joined a district that had a full music program. And around the same time, my Gen X friends will recall a TV show called Fame. And there was a woman who played the cello, and it was beautiful, and she was beautiful. And my father noticed that I always loved it when she was on. And he said, "Do you think you want to learn the cello?" But friends, I'm a core introvert. So the idea of walking up to a music teacher and just declaring, "Hi, I want to do this," it took me a long time to work up the courage. So by the time I did go down there, it was October, November, all the cellos were spoken for. And he said, "Why don't you play the bass?" Well, I didn't know what that was. It's bigger than me. It's always been bigger than me. But the nice thing was, all my friends played in the orchestra. And so every morning I got to come in, and honestly, this instrument in the orchestra when you're young is pretty easy. So I was able to move right into orchestra playing with all my friends, and it was so different from being at home and just playing the piano alone. And honestly, for me, this instrument was pretty easy. So I kept going, and in high school, I joined a youth orchestra. And we got to go on tour, and we made a recording. And one summer, I even got to go somewhere and play for Leonard Bernstein. And these are my people, that quirky, fun people. They're all invested in sound and how we make sound. So it seemed natural to me that I would go study music, which is how I came to Rochester. I came to the Eastman School to do my training. And I think when people who aren't musicians think about that, they think about the way ballet dancers train. It's very physical. And it's physical. We do a lot of practicing. 4 hours a day was my minimum from my teacher. But the thing we really focus on in music school is how we hear. In fact, we have a whole class called ear training. And in that class, I need to be able to develop the skill to hear what someone's played and write it down, note for note, rhythm for rhythm, everything perfect. And we also focus on our inner hearing so that I can read music, look at it, hear it in my mind, and then sing it back to you. And those skills are really important when you go into this profession. So I got very lucky. I got a job here with the Rochester Philharmonic when I was 25, and I had 10 great years of playing together with this orchestra, this beautiful music that we played, taking it out into the community. It was really wonderful until it started to change. And I would wake up, some days I'd be dizzy, and some days my hearing would be crackly, or some days it sounded like it was coming through a broken speaker. And then when these episodes would end, I wouldn't hear quite as much as I did before them. And it didn't matter for a while, but then over time, it kept going down until actually this ear went deaf. And this is gonna sound weird, but when that ear went deaf, it was actually a relief, because now I have one good ear, I'm hearing things fine, I think everything is going fine. But if you know anyone with hearing loss, you know that we have a tendency to bluff. And people will always come talk to my deaf ear if they want to say something, a little secret in rehearsal, or even something important in rehearsal. And if I'm going to bluff, because having hearing loss in a music industry, I mean, that's toxic for your career. You have to hide it. So I think this is going along fine, though, until one day, the whole bass section comes back from lunch, and I've stayed behind to do some work. And they say, hey, where were you? I said, I was here. Why? Well, we invited you to lunch, and you said yes. I mean, I could cover that, right? I could bluff again, and it's not a big deal that I missed lunch with them. What else was I missing? What else did I agree to that I didn't know about? And that was kind of the first start of the anxiety that started to build. Now, this problem I had with my good ear when it went deaf, you know, that would last for a day or 2 or 3 days, and I think it lasted for a month at one point. Now, most people just get it on one side, but I got really lucky. I got it on the other side too. And now I'm having this problem on this side, only it's got a new flavor. You play a note, I hear 3 notes. And none of them are the one that you played. Some days I'd hear a note, and the first note I heard was the same note I heard all day. It was so bizarre to come into rehearsal. But in between these episodes of a day or 2 or 3 days, I would hear fine again. And so I'm going through, I'm really working with orchestra, and I'm really trying to keep this low pro so no one knows. And then one night we play La Traviata. Oh, it's so beautiful. The opening is so beautiful, and the basses don't play for a full minute, and I hear my friends and the violins come in, and then the violas, and then the cellos, and then there's a rest, and the basses come in next. And I play that first note, and it is so wrong. It is so wrong. And my mind spirals. Is my bass out of tune? Did I read the wrong note? Next note, so wrong. I don't know what's happening. So I start fake playing where I'm not actually making noise and I'm just listening to the ensemble. And then I realize everything sounds wrong. Everything sounds wrong because I didn't know it yet. But not only do I have pitch distortion, I have it in different areas. So high notes are extra high, low notes are extra low. Everything sounds wrong. And by the way, I have 2.5 hours to go in this performance, and I am right at the edge of the stage, so I'm not sneaking out. So I had a long time to sit with this discomfort and think about, what am I gonna do? Not long after that, it was winter. I woke up with the flu, like you do here in Rochester, only it must have been enough for my body to change something, and I woke up completely deaf. Now we're at silence. It was already bad enough. I was working in a field that requires precision, and now I have all of this information. Now I have nothing. And sometimes these episodes end in a few days. But 1 month became 2 months, and that became 3 months, became 6 months, became 9 months. And I really think it's not possible for me to go back to the orchestra, but I want to so much. And so I think a lot of us do pros and cons lists when we're trying to make a decision. Well, this is pretty easy. If I go back to the orchestra deaf, pro, I love my job, I love my colleagues. Con, I can't hear anything. It's not gonna go well. But we don't always flip it around. What are the pros and cons of not doing something? And so I asked myself this weird question. What if I got my hearing back and I never went back to playing music? And to my complete surprise, my entire body relaxed. I thought, oh, this is not what I expected. I have a long history of teaching little kids too, and I love that so much. And I thought, okay, I bet that was a weird reaction. Let me try this question again. I get my hearing back and I don't go back to teaching kids. And my body went, oh, I was so surprised by this, but now I have a problem. I'm deaf, but I want to teach music. Like, how does that even work? And I kept going this way and I couldn't get anywhere until I realized I was asking the wrong question. I'm deaf and I want to teach music. How does that work? And when I started saying that to my colleagues, the answers just came to me. Oh, did you know you can use this app? I mean, you can see this instrument, it's huge. I can see what my students are doing. I can see when they're playing out of tune, because remember, I've got inner hearing too. I know what this is supposed to look and sound like. And so I reached out to my students one by one. I said, no, this is weird. By the way, this is text, I can't hear on the phone. I know this is weird. Would you like to continue lessons even though I can't hear anything? I would really like to keep working with you. And they all said yes. And they all continued to thrive. And we had some comical moments. You know, I couldn't be looking down. They would talk to me. I couldn't hear them, right? But I'd use my phone, use voice to text. I'd understand their questions. And they all thrived. It was such a wonderful moment to realize there is some path forward as a deaf person in music. But the thing is, that was the easiest thing I figured out. What took me so long to figure out is, how am I going to be a deaf person in our community? And there's so much grief around that, because something simple, I'd go into a store and say, do you have this in another size? And they might turn and point to it, but now I can't lip read them. And so I'd say, oh, I'm sorry, I need you to look at me so I can lip read you, I'm deaf. And almost invariably they'd say, you're deaf, but you talk so well. Well, thank you. I've been talking for most of my life. I don't have time to catch you up on what's happened over the last 40 years. But you know, the other thing that really occurred to me during this time is, this is how we treat people with hearing loss. We don't give them a chance. And you know, a lot of our elders are gonna have hearing loss just due to aging. And it was really profoundly sad to me to see that people think, oh, you're not smart. You know, you don't understand what I'm saying. Well, yes, I don't understand what you're saying because I couldn't hear it. I probably could catch on if we could find a way to communicate. So during this time, though, a lot of people would say to me, isn't it hard? Don't you miss music? Because really, performing was a huge part of my career. And I know it's called hearing loss, but that's the wrong thing to ask too. What did I gain? What did I gain during this period? And you know, some things are small and silly, but for instance, I can take my devices off. I'm completely deaf, so I can sleep anywhere. So I will always take the hotel room by the ice machine. You are welcome. I can work at any coffee shop for the same reason. I've got the mute button you wish you had at the holidays. But the really important thing I learned is that my worth is not tied up in the music that I produced. It's not tied up in the job that I had. My worth is my worth, and I always have something to give the world. So we're all gonna hit some kind of friction in our life, some kind of silence, some kind of impasse, and I just want to encourage you not to say, I want this, but that. I want this and that. You know, that silence can be terrifying, but silence can teach us to truly listen. Thank you.